Uh,
No,
my,
that's good.
my name is Adam Kruezer, and as I mentioned just previously while we were not recording, I am with the International Dark Sky Association, now known as Dark Sky International. I've been a delegate with Dark Sky International now for about 45 years. Before that, I was with the Sierra Club. I've been a mushroom monitor. You can see my little mushroom thing back here. We used to be the chairperson with the Glenelg Environmental Commission. So I've had my hands in a lot of different things. But now I'm very happy to be doing this. All right, well, I think you've heard a little bit about the chapters. We've got the Chicago chapter now, and again, this is the first time I've presented to a group that's has dark skies available to it every night. So from the perspective of what we try to do with Dark Sky International is we try to basically address the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. Um, and you'll hear that more or less through the presentation. So is that light useful? Is it targeted? What about our light levels? If we have the opportunity, how can we control the light that we're using? Um, and let's see if I can't see that. Yes, and of course we want to use a color that's more dark sky friendly. Okay, so are you one of the lucky ones? I guess probably for all of you out there, you might be. But globally, basically only 2 out of 10 people on the Earth can actually see the Milky Way. Now that's because most of us live in urban areas. We're not rural. But light pollution basically is everywhere where people are, for the most part. I usually ask people, who has seen the Milky Way. They raise their hand or they don't raise their hand. Um, the Milky Way is basically kind of a marker that we want to be able to see, we want to be able to preserve. And what you're looking at now is basically the Milky Way. So if you go outside and you can see the Milky Way, it's basically stretching from horizon to horizon, and it's an arm of our galaxy, our Milky Way galaxy. Here in Illinois, where I'm at in Glen Ellen, on the best of nights, we can only see about 30 to 35 stars. Best of nights, with perfect atmospheric conditions and everything else. Now, of course, you might be able to see much more out there. With our naked eyes, without light pollution, we should be able to see as many as about 3,000 stars, which of course can include the Milky Way. We are in the Milky Way galaxy. Incredibly, as part of our universe, there's about 200 to 300 billion galaxies, of which we are only one of those galaxies. In our galaxy, there's about 3,500 solar systems, of which we are one. And in our galaxy, in the Milky Way galaxy, we have about 100 to 400 billion stars. So, it's our heritage, it's our universe, and we should try to do what we can to preserve it and enjoy it. And the stars, of course, are not the only thing that we want to be able to enjoy with responsible outdoor lighting. Of course, we want to be able to see the aurora borealis, which has actually found its way down to where I live in Illinois. You may all see it a little bit better out there more frequently. This is a picture that I took in Michigan when we were on vacation in August of last year. And light pollution, of course, affects our ability to see the aurora borealis well too. So let's talk a little bit about light pollution. Here you can see sky glow, of course, which is horrible. It's what we deal with every day, certainly here where I live. Historically, lights as we know it were not here in the early 1800s. Van Gogh painted his Starry Night paintings, many of which he did in the 1880s with, of course, dark skies. He did not have light pollution. And this is kind of our evolution of light from fire to LED. And the importance of this is that we are who we are all mammals are who they are. Plants are what they are because of course, the millions of years, if not longer, that we've been here on Earth. And what's developed during those millions of years? Well, who we are physiologically. So, until 1900, 1920, 1930, 1940, 1950, we had dark nights. And of course, from a physiological perspective, we were accustomed to having those dark nights. And now we're affecting our own chemistries, our own physiology, and of course our wildlife friends too, with the introduction of light at night, and most specifically LED lights, which introduce a new wavelength to us that we didn't otherwise have, even with the CFLs that we had before the LEDs. And that is the introduction of blue light, which basically is sunlight at night. This is Thomas Edison. He did not invent the light bulb, but he certainly had a big role in of course, spreading its use. The first municipality to actually use artificial light at night was New York, Manhattan. There was also some smaller installations in Cleveland, but again, this would have been early 1900s before we had artificial light at night. Before that, it was basically gas light and candles. So this slide kind of gives you all a perspective of basically how artificial light at night has spread. And we're looking at more or less the 1950s through this year, 2025. It's horrific. And you see a similar perspective with respect to Europe. So what's interesting is you can see that artificial light over Lake Michigan. Well, why? Why do we see artificial light over Lake Michigan? It's because of sky glow. There isn't a light bulb on Lake Michigan unless you're on a boat or you're on Beaver Island. So the significance of this is that when light goes up in the air, it just doesn't go up, in a linear manner. It spreads. So once it hits the atmosphere, it hits water molecules, it hits other kind of material that's in the sky, and it just spreads. And that's that big dome we see. So I think you're near Dubuque, I want to say, maybe, if I'm not mistaken. I haven't been out to Galena for a while, but that light that you're seeing in the sky is that dome of light, sky glow. So I put these in today. I thought it would be interesting for everybody to kind of see where we're at. Of course, here you've got Chicago, which is where I'm at. The lighter areas are the more light polluted areas. The darker areas are the less light polluted areas. And you can see that for us, most of us have to get away from Chicagoland generally. For me, I vacation up in Michigan, where I get some good dark skies. But otherwise, I got nothing but light pollution here. And you can kind of see, I hope everybody can see this well, but this slide has Galena in it. And you can see Dubuque. So you do have the opportunity to have some dark skies out that way. Much darker than what, of course, we have here. So if you want to get down to, what is that, Bellevue or Elizabeth or, up into Wisconsin, you have the opportunity to go out and see some tremendous nights. And again, here's just a little bit more of a close view. I'm jealous. So this is kind of basically, a demonstration of what we just saw. So for you out there, you probably have a rural sky. You don't have a completely dark sky. You'd have to go further west or further north to have a completely dark sky. Me, I got a city sky. Okay. So what can we do to, preserve what we have? What can we do to restore what we have? Light pollution consequences. Well, right now, the biggest consequence of light is LEDs. Some of you are probably moving to LEDs now. Most municipalities, when they do convert to better lighting, they're moving to LEDs. We want LEDs, or at least presumption is that we want LEDs because they are so much more energy efficient. But they're bringing a lot to us that we didn't otherwise have. And again, that's that blue light. So we want to try to avoid what we're seeing here in this slide. And by doing that, of course, we'll be more dark sky friendly, even when we have the lights on at night. Now, a lot of people, of course, are concerned about safety, but you are not more safe with more light. And maybe all of you can better appreciate that because you're out there where it is dark. More light can actually be less safe. Why? Primarily because of glare. Just too much light and because of glare, and that's especially true with LEDs. Of course, when I'm in person, I'm always asking people, have you noticed how bright the headlights are? The headlamps are now with the newer cars. They're so,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. So with the LED lights that are now being introduced into the vehicles, you can see that intensity. The lumens, the brightness, it's just so much more significant than it was with the halogens or the other types of lights that were with our automobiles. Well, we've got that same thing when we have it on the house. We've got that same thing when we have it on the warehouse or on the commercial building or whatever the case may be. That light doesn't change. It's an LED light being used on an automobile. So when we're confronted with that light, it's so bright that we almost have to look away. We can't actually look at the light coming at us because we're blinded. And of course, our pupils are constricting so tightly that we can't see what's to the right, we can't see to the left, whether there's a pedestrian on the sidewalk, whatever the case may be. We almost want to just drive away so we don't get punished by this bright light. Well, that's true also when you're on a sidewalk or in your backyard. You want to try to avoid the glare that's going to affect your natural ability to see well. And that's what makes it unsafe. So here's a good example. And any one of you can do this tonight if you like. Of course, we've got the unshielded light to the left. When we put our hand over that light, i.e. shield it, we can now see, of course, the person at the fence. Why? Because we're just allowing our eyes to be able to do what they would otherwise do physiologically if we didn't have the light in our eyes. If you go outside, wait 20, 30, 40 minutes, now it's going to be better for all of you out there. Your eyes will adjust so that ultimately you'll be able to walk pretty well without the benefit of a light. If you need a light, think about using a flashlight that has a red light. It's less obtrusive generally, and you won't scare nature. You won't scare animals if you'd like to see them at night. So think about the glare that you're being confronted with, so that when you do look outside and you want to see who's stealing the car from your garage, you can see that person well without having to, of course, shield your eyes from that light. So again, better outdoor lighting, more responsible outdoor lighting. I talked a little bit about energy waste already. Light is energy. So for all of you who might be concerned about the fossil fuels that we're using, climate change, etc., every time you've got that light bulb on, you are burning fossil fuels and you are contributing to greenhouse gases and you are contributing to, of course, a warmer climate. So as Jimmy Carter said to some of us when we were young, and I was 16 when he was elected, let's think about sustainability, let's think about conservation, let's think about turning off the lights so that, of course, we're using less. And here we've got the current graph with respect to the global mean temperature. So things have got to change. We have got to use less fossil fuels. We've got to use less energy, and that includes the light that we leave on all night outdoors. So let's talk about human health a little bit. Well, when I mentioned basically the millions of years that mammals have been here, we've adopted this physiological, this physiology, these chemicals in us, these hormones that basically allow us to sleep well. So what is triggering that physiologically with us? Darkness, which releases melatonin from our pineal gland. You know, again, when I'm usually with everybody, I'll ask them to raise their hand about who's taking melatonin supplements. Well, we shouldn't have to take melatonin supplements if we're in a dark place. So when that sun goes down, which is when our body will start, triggering the cascade of chemicals that ultimately allow us to sleep well, we want to think about turning off those handheld devices, maybe getting a filter so we're at least trying to do what we can to remove the white light that we're now confronted with these LEDs. And better yet, let's turn off the lights altogether. Maybe read a book, with the darkest of light possible. And then, before we go to bed, again, think about turning off all the lights, letting your body start to adjust, let that melatonin release, do what you can to keep your bedroom dark. Unfortunately, that's not available to me. My neighbors, some of them had their lights on all night. I can read a book in my bedroom, simply because of my neighbor's light across the street. Which of course is awful because then I have to have, curtains that block out that light. So our circadian rhythm is very important. And there are a lot of studies being done now, especially with this introduction of daylight at night, these blue wavelength, white wavelengths that we're now confronted with respect to, we're just not getting that melatonin. And of course, the chemical reactions that follow. So we're not restoring. When we sleep well, we're restoring. We're restoring physically, we're restoring mentally, we're restoring our immune system. We're getting better sleep. We're not up, we're not eating. We have less diabetes, we have less disease generally. And there are a lot of studies that are suggesting that what we're doing is we're causing ourselves to be very much less healthy. So let's think about being healthy. Let's think about having darkness available to us so that our body can restore mentally and physically. We feel better. We're cognitively better. We're physically better. Great book. It's kind of dry, but if you have the time, read it. Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. He talks a little bit about, the importance of darkness, but he also talks about removing alcohol before we go to bed, not eating before we go to bed, and some other great things. But more importantly, he talks about the importance of getting 8 hours of sleep a day, if you can, if not more. We want to strive for 8 hours. And to do that, we have to have darkness. So let's talk about some ecological, we're part of our ecology, but let's talk about our wildlife friends. More and more and more and more studies are being done on the effect of artificial light at night on our wildlife friends. I typically like to talk about just the birds and the insects, but I think a good example that a lot of people already are aware of is turtles. So, maybe some of you have heard this, but in Florida, when the sea turtles hatch, their eggs hatch, there are ordinances, I think it's a state statute now, where you have to have lights off during hatching season. Or if you do have lights on, those lights have to remove that blue wavelength. They have to be more red, more amber. Why? Because from a natural perspective, when these little turtles, hatchlings hatch and find their way out of the sand, they're looking for the light on the horizon. That is what they're looking for because for them, that triggers their path to the ocean. Well, now, of course, the bright light on the horizon is not the ocean. It's the street. It's the apartments. It's the condominiums, whatever the case may be. So instead of finding their way to the ocean quickly, and of course being less subjected to predation, they're wandering around, or unfortunately they're finding their way to the road and they're getting crushed. So that's a good example of kind of the the millions of years of basically tradition, that mammals, of course, want to adhere to with their life cycles. Mammals don't have the benefits of GPS. We do, but they don't. They're still relying on natural nocturnal cues. And of course, that involves birds too. We're starting migration season right now, spring migration. And what we found is that uh, most birds migrate. So maybe I think it's 80, 85% of all birds migrate. So they're migrating during spring and they're migrating during fall. And what we're finding is that with the introduction of artificial light at night, again, especially daylight at night, the birds are losing their focus when they're flying. Of course, they've consumed food all day. They get ready for these nighttime travels, but the light is bringing them down and disturbing that path. And when that light brings the birds down, especially into cities like Chicago, which is the #1 most hazardous location for migrating birds in North America, they're going to be going into a situation where they're going to be striking glass. So as you can see where you're of course by the Mississippi River. That is one of the most significant flight paths for migrating birds. And again, 80% of most birds do migrate at night, including most of our songbirds. I don't know if some of you actually get outside and listen to some of the birds migrate during the evening. Sometimes you can hear them, not just the sandhill cranes, but all kinds of birds. You can hear them. They're very vocal at night. So this is, the memorial, the September 11 memorial in New York, and these are LED lights. They have to turn these LED lights off. Now it's only during September 11, but during that day, they have to turn these lights off every 20 minutes just to release the thousands of birds that get caught up in this light and fly around and around and around in this light. And of course, they tire and some of them don't do well. So it's a good example of how light captures these birds. Now, this is more Chicago centric. I don't know if anybody's heard of this out there, but in Chicago, we had a historically bad night involving many songbirds that struck the McCormick Place, and we lost about 1,000 birds in one night. Why? Because at McCormick Place, because it's on Lake Michigan, and the birds are coming down because Chicago's very, well lighted at night, unfortunately. The birds just flew together and struck McCormick Place, all the glass that's at McCormick Place at the same time. And we lost about 1,000 birds in one night. Well, the good news is that caused the Chicago Metropolitan, can't recall the exact name, but authority to rethink what they had been doing with the McCormick Place. For a long time, they had been encouraged to shut the curtains at night, turn off the lights at night, do a number of things that hopefully would reduce, of course, deaths with birds, injuries with birds. But they didn't until this one event. So what they're doing now, what they've just done is they've put this film on the windows, all the windows that face the lake. They spent millions of dollars doing this so that, of course, the birds see that the glass is there. And even at night, when the light is on, they can avoid striking these windows. And you'll see that these dots, if you will, are relatively close together. So even with your windows at your home, it's not enough just to have, maybe something in the middle of the window, like, hopefully from that you'll discourage birds. You really need to place these dots, these items, whatever the case, relatively close together, or the birds think they can fly through it. So with the introduction of this film at McCormick Place, they now have a 93% decrease in bird strikes at McCormick Place. And McCormick Place has also volunteered to shut the curtains when they do have nighttime events. So kudos to them. I don't know if any of you have heard of the site Birdcast, but if you want, you can go there every night and basically see how many birds are migrating through North America. And you can actually focus to certain locations. So you'll see here that for tonight, there are 16 million birds predicted to be migrating through North America. And you can kind of see how close I guess the majority of the birds that might be migrating are finding their way over toward the Mississippi River. And it'll get even more. There'll be more birds. We can have as many as 300 million, 350 million birds migrating through North America on any given night. The reason why we probably don't have much migrating tonight is because of the currents. So when we've got warm weather coming up from the south during spring, you're going to have many more birds migrating with those currents northward. So let's talk about insects for a minute. Like birds, insects rely on nocturnal cues, and they rely on the stars, just like sailors did, before GPS. They rely on the stars, they rely on the moon for navigation. Moths, for example, actually fly with their backs to the light. That allows them to basically be centric with where they are when they're in the air. So they like to fly with their backs to the light, but hopefully without artificial light. When artificial light is there, it's no longer the moon that, of course, is a long distance away from the moths, but it's the light, i.e. the moon, that's now on your garage. So they're going to go to that light, and unfortunately, they might fly around forever and ever and ever, and they tire, and they of course die on your apron, your stoop. Although we don't have as many bugs anymore, so we don't see that as much. You might out there, and of course they're subjected to predation too. Moths are a significant pollinator. So with wild ones, if I'm not mistaken, your group is kind of centric on native species, native plants, things of that nature, I believe. A lot of our plants rely on nocturnal pollinators. About 60% of our insect population is nocturnal. So here you've got a sphinx moth that's pollinating a plant. I don't know which plant, but they're pollinating at night. So moths are incredibly important. I don't know to what extent some of you are familiar with Doug Tallamy's book with Keystone Plants, but he talks about how important oaks are. Why? Because the insects are attracted to the oaks. It's a safe haven for them. And of course, that's true with moths too. Well, you think about the cycle of life. Well, not only are, of course, we relying on our nocturnal friends for pollination, but our other wildlife friends are relying on moths for food. And with our birds, the fledglings, for the most part, they're eating caterpillars. That's what goes down the fledgling's throat. Well, so if through artificial light at night or chemicals or whatever the case may be, we're decreasing our moth population, we're also decreasing our caterpillar population, our fledgling population, et cetera, et cetera. It's just, a never ending cycle of destruction. And of course, I'm sure you're all aware that we are now in an insect apocalypse. The mass of insects that we now have compared to what we had only 3 to 4 decades ago, if not even shorter than that, it's incredibly decreased. And ultimately, we're going to be the ones that are going to pay for it. So with respect to our wildlife friends, let's finish up with the fireflies. I don't know if any of you know this. Again, I usually just ask people to raise their hands, but the bioluminescent is a mating tool. So that's why they have it. And each male firefly uses that bioluminescence to attract the female who does not have bioluminescence. So it's kind of a mating call. And believe it or not, each one of these fireflies with their bioluminescence have their own pattern their own signals, kind of like with our fingerprints. So of course, the females are looking for that, but if they can't find that light, that bioluminescence, because of the artificial light in the yard, et cetera, we just have less mating, similar to what we have with frogs, for example. So we want to reduce that artificial light at night. So of course, the fireflies can find each other and mate well and have little fireflies. Of course, chemicals in our lawns are affecting that too. How we spray for mosquitoes, it's, one big disaster. This is a great book. If you have an opportunity, check it out. It's a new book. I love it. And I think everybody that is joining me for this little show will too. Talks about glowworms, talks about fireflies, talks about a lot of our nocturnal friends. And this lady, the author, she's getting out into the dark and finding out how much there is to love at night. Salamanders hate artificial light. We have fewer and fewer salamanders now. They do not like artificial light. So of course their environment is becoming smaller and smaller and smaller as they're confronted with artificial light. Of course, they don't like heat either. Frogs don't like artificial light. They're predated more with artificial light at night. They try to stay in the darkness. So of course they're not mating as much either. So this artificial light, the consequences on our wildlife friends is just, it's overwhelming, and new studies are addressing it every day. So let's talk about what we can do to make a difference, and then I'll answer some questions. First and foremost, I don't have a slide here, but think about whether you need the light on. So, when you go to bed, how many lights are on outside and why? Are you up at 2 o'clock looking to see who's outside your house? Are you up at 3 o'clock looking to see who's, wandering around the garage? My hunch is you're not. So why do we keep those lights on? Is it for decoration? Is it just because you feel more comfortable? Or is it because you really need them? So start to think twice about what lights you need on outside when you go to bed. Think about turning most of them off when you go to bed. When you do, of course, with any lights that you do leave on at night, you want to shield them. We want to have that light going down. We don't want to have it going out, which of course is going to contribute to glare, and we don't want it going up, which of course is contributing to light pollution. And even with light that's coming down onto the ground, remember that light's reflecting up. So we'll talk about how to address that a little bit, but the best thing you can do with your outdoor fixture is to have it shielding that light down, like a gooseneck light bulb, a gooseneck fixture, for example. And there's a good example. So you got a couple goosenecks here. Of course, we got a couple fixtures that don't have the benefit of good shielding. So when you go to the hardware store, you're thinking about maybe converting, the fixtures you got outside. Think about getting those fixtures that shield that light down. You don't want to be able to see the bulb, ultimately, really. You don't want to be able to see the bulb. What we want to try to do is we want to try to address light trespass. So think about what you're doing at your own house with respect to how you're affecting your neighbor with your lights. Should your neighbor be polluted by your lights? I mean, would you pollute your neighbor with other pollutants? So think about how you're affecting your neighbor with respect to the light that you're using. Let's try to keep it on our properties. And the best way to do that is to shield it. So moving away from shielding, and this too is of course what we're now dealing with LEDs. It's color temperature. Before LEDs, whether it was with the old Tommy Eds or whatever the case may be, basically we had always warm white light. We want to return to that. We want to get away. We don't want to use these LEDs that have that bright white light. That's daylight. It simulates daylight. We didn't used to have it, but we do now. Okay, we don't want that at night. We don't want daylight at night. So move to a more amber color with your light bulbs outside. And to a great extent, maybe with what you're doing inside, especially in your bedroom when you're going to bed at night. You want a bright white light in the garage? Terrific. You want a bright light in the basement, where you can perform surgery on your husband if you need to? Terrific. But we don't want to use these bright white lights outside. And here's a good example of the bulbs, basically. So we want to stay with the 2000 Kelvin bulbs, which is basically the amber light. Okay. For outdoors, don't go with more than a 2000 Kelvin bulb in that range. So let's talk a little bit about brightness. LEDs are so much more intense than what we're used to. So if you look at the incandescents, for example, here in the middle, you'll see that we've always been accustomed to looking at brightness from the perspective of watts, which is a measure of power. Okay. 40 watts is less power. 150 watts is more power. You're introducing more light. So when you would go out and buy your incandescents, and even now when you're buying LEDs, you were accustomed to watts. But with an incandescent, to get to 450 lumens, which is the actual measure of brightness, you only need 4 watts. Now, to get to 450 lumens with an LED, you only need 6 to 9 watts. That's how much more intense LEDs are. Okay. So when you think about, all right, I'm going to buy a 150 watt bulb, a 150 watt LED, because that's what's on the package, remember how much you're increasing the brightness level. Okay. It's no longer a measure of incandescence, it's a measure of LEDs. So we want to look at lumens, which is the universal measure, regardless of the type of bulb. So this is just one distributor of bulbs among many. You'll see this labeling with every bulb, every LED bulb, regardless of who's distributing it. These are EcoSmart bulbs, but what you'll see is basically 3 colors. So if you go to the hardware store, you're going to see daylight in that baby blue. You're going to see bright white in that yellow, and you're going to see soft white. So for outdoor use, you want to use soft white. You want to look for the orange label. Don't use the daylight. Don't use the bright white outdoors. Go with a soft white orange label. And you'll see, like the food menu you might see on the crackers that you buy at the grocery store, you'll see brightness here. Okay. And it's measured by lumens, but you're also going to see the watts because that's what you're accustomed to. Yes, 40 watts will be less, but what you want to look at is lumens. And for outdoors, you really don't want to use lumens that are in excess of 800. And sincerely, you're better off going down to about 450. So let's look at the better box. If you want to buy a box of LEDs, three bulbs to box or what have you, look for this. Again, it's going to be universal regardless of the distributor of the bulb. You're going to want to look for the orange label, soft white. You're going to want to look for a brightness at 460. See what's down there in the bottom left corner? Go with that lumens of about 450 with your outdoor bulbs. Now, if you want to spend a little bit more money and buy bulbs, basically, 1 bulb per box, think about doing even better. The soft white is 2700 Kelvin, by the way. Okay. But you can do better insofar as color temperature, in other words, more amber. Go to 2200 Kelvin or 2100 Kelvin, which again is more amber. If we lived in a perfect world at night, we'd all have red light. Okay, but we don't want to look like a bordello. So we choose amber. So think about 2100, 2200 with your color. And of course, stay low with those lumens. And like I said at the beginning, think about how many lights you need to leave on with the house. Maybe one on the stoop all night, or maybe one in the garage, or if you feel you need one on the barn, but otherwise turn them off at night, shield them, right? Amber, less bright. If you have the opportunity to program your lights, program them to turn off, program them to dim after certain hours. Use a motion sensor. The motion sensor lights are much better than they used to be. Okay, they're much more site specific and they turn off soon. But even those motion lights, think about whether they're shielded and what the color temperature is and how bright they are. Okay. And I think we're at the end because we started so low. So every day needs a night, right? Thank you. So let me stop the share and answer some questions.
All right, this is open to questions. If you guys have a question here, might be easier than me relaying it, just to come up and speak a little closer to the laptop microphone. Or anybody that's connected online.
Yes, there are no chats right now, but if anybody's connected online and you want to chat with your questions, I will open the chat.
You know, turn their lights up, there's no lights on. That you're penalized if you have lights out there.
Yeah, so just to give you,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't hear the comment.
so just to give you a heads up, Adam, so the Galena territory is a certified dark sky environment. And we have a lights off at 1 o'clock requirement. We have the requirement that there is no light going up. I don't know, it's not that it has to be canned and pointed. It is that third of the fourth for light examples. So nothing go up. Outdoor lights have to be frosted so you can't see the bulb. So it's slightly muted as far as that goes.
So that involves what territory then? How much does that include, this dark sky?
How,
Or-
6,400 acres.
So it's somewhere just shy of 7,000 acres in the Galena territory, which is just east of Galena City proper.
But that's not Dark Sky International, is it?
No.
No,
We
Friends?
we call it. They acquired it. They no longer offer that, but we qualify for its permit.
so it's not Dark Sky International, but something that's no longer offered, like Friends of the Dark Sky or something like that.
Okay, well, you have the opportunity, if you wish to pursue it, to become basically a Dark Sky International certified area.
Hmm.
So, the Dark Sky International, what we do primarily is we do what we can to preserve certain areas where it's already dark. So you've got dark sky certified parks, for example. Many of the parks, many of our national parks, including Voyager up in Minnesota, are dark sky parks. So in order to get that certification, they have to basically put into policy, these 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. And of course,
Okay.
do what they can to influence their neighbors' decisions too. And there's dark sky international certified municipalities and so on and so forth. So kudos to whoever's doing that out there. I was just, I want to say, I shouldn't say I'm responsible, but I helped get passed effective January 1st of 2025. Governor Pritzker signed the bill. We now have in Illinois the first responsible outdoor lighting bill in the country. Now, the bill only governs Department of Natural Resource properties, but it's a good first step. So with every state park, with every property that's owned or operated by the state of Illinois through the Department of Natural Resources, now with whatever new lighting they try to, of course, pursue, or whatever the case may be, they have to adhere to the 5 principles of responsible outdoor lighting. So in that statute, we have specifics with respect to shielding, we have specifics with respect to color, we have specifics with respect to brightness, we have specifics about when that light has to be turned off. So that's a new Illinois statute. I don't know if you got any state parks out there, but hopefully over time, you're gonna see some changes with some of those too.
Excellent. So I do have a question, and this is somewhat related to inquiry I got from a neighbor up here. Is part of the dark sky, I don't know, authorization, certification, whatever the rules are, is it always have a lights out time frame?
Well, um, I don't know if it's always true with every park or every property that's dark sky certified, but I believe that one of the principles for the most part is try to do what you can to turn those lights off at 11 o'clock.
Okay.
All right, but remember, we're also shielding lights, which is a huge thing. To just have that light focused on the ground, and to have it in an amber color, and to have less brightness, because with less brightness, you're getting less reflection. So even if you choose to keep the light on all night, for whatever reason, maybe you go out to the barn or whatever the case may be at 1 o'clock to have a beer, okay. But, think about how you're basically approaching it late.
We did have a side comment here. Nobody here goes out at 1 o'clock.
No, we don't. If you're where I live,
They're like, it's dark out there.
yeah, if you're where I live, I can go outside at 2 o'clock and walk up and down these suburban streets, and everybody's got their house lit up like it's Christmas.
Oh yeah, we moved here from a Chicago suburb, or most everybody here has moved from a Chicago suburb like that.
Well, I grew up in very rural Michigan, and I'm still doing, this is my 5th presentation this year already, and I've got more scheduled for next month. I'm still doing as much as I possibly can to try to get everybody to go with the Michigan lighting.
All right. Any questions here or anybody online?
I didn't see anything in the chat.
All right, well then, Adam, we really do appreciate your insight here. It's nice to know that the implications of a dark sky environment or a not dark sky environment, as far as supporting the insects and the wildlife and each one of us, just what light does to us. And I liked your one slide about every day needs a night.
Yeah,
Kind of attribute that to people too.
right. I think that maybe all of you have heard of Xerces Society. They're very much concerned about native plants and more specifically insects, but they did a study that showed that with your native gardens, for example, if those gardens, those plants are lighted by artificial light at night, you have significant decrease in pollination to the tune of almost 60%. So when your native gardens, whatever the case may be, in your yard or what have you, are not exposed to artificial light at night, your pollination rate increases dramatically. So, sometimes we forget about our nocturnal existence, but it is part of our 24 hours. And like I said, most everything around here is crawling around, flying around at night. So let's think about how we're affecting our friends, of course, our own health, after we go to bed.
Cool. Oh, yeah, one more question. So in your history, do you have any guidance or whatever for those communities that might be resistant to dark sky
Yeah.
techniques or procedures?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of what I do is approaching municipalities. I've had some good success where I live. Glen Ellen is, in my opinion, darker than our neighboring communities because of just better education. So every spring we have a newsletter, and a lot of this started when I was with the Environmental Commission. We have a newsletter every spring that encourages people to be more aware of their nocturnal lighting, to turn the lights off at night. We just recently presented to the Metropolitan Mayor's Caucus, which has 270 municipalities in their membership. We talked to their environmental commission. We're trying to encourage them to include on their moving agenda, awareness of the effect of outdoor lighting at night. So what you really need to do is you need to find out what your municipalities have with respect to ordinances, and what they're doing with respect to planning, for example. So if you've got a new commercial development, what restrictions, if any, are on that commercial development? What restrictions might be present with respect to residential lighting? Most municipalities do not have any restrictions whatsoever on residential lighting. And yet residential lighting is now known to be the most significant contributor to artificial light at night, otherwise known as light pollution. So you got to find out what's going on in your municipality. What are the ordinances? Go and talk to your mayor or your village president or the assistant manager, or whatever the case may be. And maybe go, I don't know if you got environmental commissions out there that's part of your municipalities. Go to them and try to encourage them to be better aware. But it's really a grassroots effort. It takes a lot of effort, like a lot of things. You get out there, you put the boots on, and you do what you can to address it. If you go to the Dark Sky International website, www.darksky.org, they tell you everything you need to know. They give you the roadmap to get there.
Good. Well, thank you, Adam. We appreciate it. This is all new to me, so
I wish I could be there in person. It'd be much more interactive, and we wouldn't have
I know.
for the recording. But thanks.
Yeah,
So much
just so you know, while we have the four of us online, we also have another 7 people here. So
Well, thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining me tonight.
thank you.
All right, take care.
And thank you for the 3 of you that connected.
Bye-bye.
Have a good night.